Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Craig, who's a professional photographer from Washington State. And Craig recently created this image on the Mindful Eye's Whidbey Island workshop. This is the Coupeville Pier and Wharf House, and very near where we stayed on the workshop. And the whole workshop was kind enough to say that they would share images that we critiqued on the workshop with a Mindful Eye audience. So we're going to be looking at quite a few of those images over the course of the next few weeks. This image by Craig is an image that I really like. The Wharf House is a subject matter that a lot of people photograph, and a lot of times it's photographed a lot bigger than this. In other words, it takes up a lot more of the composition. One of the things I really love about this shot is the sky, and one of the takeaways from today's critique is that if you're shooting landscapes or landscape architecture and you have a sky, it's real easy to get lulled into this sort of false sense of security that you'll have partly cloudy skies the next day, or you can come back. And what I've found shooting landscapes professionally and personally now for over 20 years is that two skies are the same, and you can be in a place and have a partly cloudy forecast and have a day that's partly cloudy, and then after that have severely clear for 10 straight days. And mainly what I'm trying to say here is that when I have great skies, I will tend to do what Craig has done here. I'll tend to really heavily weight my compositions toward trying to include the sky and bring it into the shot, because for me, a really beautiful sky like this can lend so much weight and so much feeling to a smaller subject. When we go environment dominant and we have this kind of expression in the sky, these kinds of qualities of lines and space shapes and colors and gestures, so on and so forth, just very, very powerful. And don't want to put too fine of a point on it, but in situations like this, I would say, the wharf more than likely and the pier will be there tomorrow, but this sky will not. The other thing that I enjoy about the image is really taking sort of an extreme compositional angle on the main subject, placing it way down here in the bottom and way over on the left, and making this very much environment dominant. And the other thing that I enjoy about the image, I've been talking quite a bit lately about sort of implied energy, sort of like connecting the dots between subjects. And one of the things I really like about Craig's composition here is the way this line moves, and you have to make a stretch between here and here to keep going. But in other words, there's a real nice feeling of a real strong movement of line, and then that picks up again up here, and it moves through the image in sort of this arcing S-curve that goes from corner to corner. I really like that. Also really love the quality of light here. It's just really beautiful how the sun's just come up. You're getting just a little bit of sort of specular flashback from the brightest part of the sky. So another interesting thing here is that we can get so caught up in sunrise and sunset and shoot straight into that. And in this situation, there's a lot more dramatic contrast and color over here because this is where the sun is coming up. But Craig is shooting side light, so he's shooting away from that most dramatic color, getting a really beautiful flashback on the wharf house, and that's creating quite a bit of dimension in both the wharf house and the pier. One of the main things that I wanted to talk about today was the idea of going inside of an image to correct keystoning in a shot that has architecture. In this image, there are several things that we talked about possibly changing in an alternate version. We talked about maybe giving just a little bit more space at the bottom to let the mast of the sailboat finish here. And we also talked about maybe working with color here so that this kind of magenta moving into violet kind of feeling that we're seeing in the water that's not quite being matched by the sky, that we might play around with that. There's something about the color here that looks a little bit incongruent with the sky, and we talked about maybe just toning that down in the image. But one of the main things that we talked about is how it can be sort of difficult to get away with some subjects that are architectural that are square to the edge of the frame, and then others where you've got this keystoning, where you have this distortion where the lines that should be square with the edge are not square because we've taken our camera, in this case it's exaggerated by the fact there's a very wide angle lens on the camera, but we've taken the camera and we've tilted it up, and we'll get distortion and more on the edges, and you're seeing that here. And so what we could do is we could copy the background and we could go to Edit, Transform, skew, and we could start pulling from the edge. But to do that, we're going to have to pull a very, very, very long way, because we're going to be pulling away, a far way away from the subject matter. If we push down here, it'll have a big effect, but then we're going to have duplication on the edge. And so a technique that you might try is I'd just use the marquee tool here, and I'm going to do this in a fairly rough way, but you'll get the idea, and just make a selection of this much of the image, so essentially where the problem is, and go ahead and Apple J on a Mac, Control J on a PC, put that up on its own layer. Now go to Edit, Transform, Skew, and now we can straighten this up by pulling here. We could bring in a guide, if we wanted to get particular with this. But by pulling here, we can now straighten this up and have a big effect. By pulling on this corner, I'm not going to have any duplication like I would if I push in on the bottom corner. Go ahead and double click here and apply that, and you can see, I'm going to zoom in here. You can see, let me move this around, a couple of different things. You can see that by skewing this, that I've got this uneven thing that's happened here. I also have an unnatural edge to the selection because I've moved that information around on a hard edge where we made the selection with the marquee tool. So let me go back in and look at the image small now, and we can clean that up by doing two quick things. We can just come right back to this layer, it's still active, go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and scale this up until that line matches, and I'm not going to do it perfect, but you get the idea. And now what I need to do is add a layer mask to this. Hit the X key, that makes black my foreground color. Hit the B key for the brush. I want to go to 100% opacity on the brush. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint along that hard edge. And again, to avoid duplication, I might need to go in at 100%. I definitely would, and paint along this edge to make sure I don't have any duplication. Same thing down here in the water, and what I'm doing there is I'm just rounding that hard edge off so that we don't see where I made the selection. Hopefully, without doing this at 100% and doing it perfectly, you get the idea. Now here's where we started and here's where we ended up. It's just the idea of coming in and correcting some keystoning distortion within the image. We could do the same thing right here to the sailboat. Really beautiful environment dominant architecture shot from Craig. I want to say a huge thank you to him for participating in the Mindful Eyes Would-Be Allen workshop and being generous enough to share this image with us on the Daily Critique. We hope to see you again real soon on the Mindful Eye. Thanks a lot, everybody.